Hey everyone, I'd like to introduce a seed project using TypeScript and Angular. Called it AngularTS seed. And here I have an example of how to set it up, but I'm going to walk you through it just because there's quite a few steps. So you might be asking why Angular and why TypeScript. I kind of walk through that on the front page, so I'm assuming that you're already interested in using TypeScript, which is a ECMA6 compiler that gives you type annotations as well as all the ECMA6 goodness. Okay, so you're going to need Grunt, so you want to install your Grunt CLI globally. You'll also need Bower, so you'll want to install Bower globally, and of course you'll need Node to install both of these with npm. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and clone this repo locally and walk you through setting it up. So we're going to just git clone, and now we can cd into our seed project. We're going to need to do an npm install, download Grunt and any other things that it requires. And when that finishes, we can now do a Bower install. Oops, I'm going to jump the gun there. Okay, Bower install. And now this will download all the front end stuff like Angular and whatnot. Okay, so we have one other step after this. So Grunt and Bower are used to manage the packages for the backend, or in other words, the Grunt side of things, and then also the browser side of things. And in order to get started, we'll need to run this grunt init. And what this does is it just copies our libraries over into the lib directory, as you'll see down here. And it also compiles our app because, well, it should compile. Now, after it compiles, it generates some code for you. I'll get into that a little bit more, but we should be able to run our tests. So I'm going to go ahead and run grunt test, which will concat and minify our test code into a file called test.js. You'll notice also that it pauses here because it's waiting for code changes. Anytime you make a change to your code and press save, it'll recompile and rerun all your tests. So we'll just break out of that loop there, and I'll go ahead and show you what's going on under the hood. Alright, so inside our directory, we've got our node modules and Bower component, of course, our package.json, and our grunt file. I chose to make the grunt file CoffeeScript just because I like the syntax of CoffeeScript, less having to play around with commas the whole time and curly braces, and you can kind of just focus on the config. Alright, so we have a TS, which is for the Grunt TS plugin. If you're familiar with Grunt, you'll notice this is a configuration here. I created 3 targets: app, watch, and test. App and watch are the same, but watch will watch for changes. And test, it will use the test reference file, which if you aren't familiar with TypeScript, TypeScript has a way to reference other files that your file depends on. And similar to require.js, it'll actually place everything in the right order in order for the things that you're referencing to be defined. And you can see that that's the case, but a way to see it even easier is if I go into this public directory and I look at my TypeScript directory. Now I have this app, def, and test directories. So app is for all my app code, def is for any of the TypeScript declaration files that I have, and test is for test code. So I'm going to cd into app, and inside here you'll see this is the root of all the Angular code. In TypeScript you typically have this reference file, reference.ts, and these things right here are just comments that say, hey, I depend on this file, these TypeScript definitions being available. If it's a declaration file, it contains no code, it just has you know, the libraries that you're using. So here you'll see I'm using Node UUID, jQuery, Angular, and Angular Route. Now this doesn't actually contain any code, it just has all the type declarations of things that you might want to call from any of these libraries. Then I have kind of all the code that I wrote for this seed project, which you know, I just have util for doing assertions, which can be useful for catching errors when you want something to be true every time, and got some models in there, and then there's this section right here. So this is something that the gruntTS plugin gives you when you're in work mode, which I'll go ahead and pull this up and show you. So cd into code and then AngularTS seed. Now if I'm in grunt work mode, what this does is it will compile all the app code, and then it'll watch for file changes. So if I add a new file, it will actually go to this manage reference sections of this reference file, and we'll add a new file in here. So to demonstrate that this is the case, I'm going to go ahead and open up code, Angular, public, TypeScript, app. And here I'll just test. Add it. And testing. Don't really need to put anything in that file, but you'll notice that when I close this and open it again, down here you'll see this. Oops. See this guy right here, test.ts. And of course, if I remove it and then refresh this file, oops, that it has disappeared. So while grunt work is running, it'll keep your reference file up to date in this section that starts with grunt start and ends with grunt end. And then you can have anything that needs to happen after these unordered managed dependencies, things that need to come at the end, like for example the boot.ts file. So this goes ahead and bootstraps Angular to the page. But you'll notice there are other places where, you know, the modules are Angular modules, and they depend on code being initialized in this above section here. So I'm going to walk through what's actually going on in this project a little bit, but I'm going to load it up in an IDE. So this works really well with WebStorm or IntelliJ. So here I have the seed project. You'll see it at just kind of a higher level. I've got the public directory, the compiled JavaScript, and the TypeScript source. And the libs that get moved here are moved here by gruntbauer, which is a plugin that I wanted to introduce to you earlier, but I'll get back to that. And so here's our app code. So I've already shown you the reference file. Here's where you bootstrap the module, and then inside modules is where you will have all the modules you want to define. I broke it out into common services, so that way you can share services between other Angular modules. And then I have a main module for just the main configuration. And this thing depends on, when you go to the definition of it, it depends on this services common. And you'll notice up here I put this long comment about, you know, module dependencies and how to avoid circular dependencies by just referring to it by name here, because if you refer to it by name, it must be in a linear order, which means it's linearizable and thus not a circular dependency. Since Angular doesn't really give you any help about this until runtime, I figured you can see here, if you just create the module and then in a file named the same thing, for example main, you can refer to that module and add any configurations on top of that. Okay, so that's the modules directory. We've also got some models, directives, and controllers. I kind of wanted to show you, the workflow in here. So you'll notice for controllers, we get this ECMA syntax for adding classes. The nice thing here is that if I export a new class, call it sample controller, and add a constructor, takes a scope, and inside here we can attach things to scope. I'm going to go ahead and just make our simple hello world application here. And now we'll go ahead and create a partial. And notice after I save the partial and reload the directory, since I have grunt work running, it will pick up that I've created this template and automatically create a module named the same thing as the file with an HTML variable. So I can refer to this template in my controllers. So I go to the modules, I go to my main module, and you'll notice here that controllers is a module, but is being passed into this controller method on the Angular module. Controller will also accept an object with key value pairs, where the key is the name of the controller and the value is its actual implementation, which is of course a function. So inside the module controllers, these everything that's exported is a name on the object. So there's a controllers.tasklist controller, and so this will be picked up by Angular as the name of the controller, and this is the function that it calls. So you can see that the controller actually can be represented by a class, and this is the typical ECMA 6 style of writing Angular code. So you get to start using it right away. So here we get the task list controller, we get our scope, and we get this UUID generator. That's for our already written controller. We have our sample controller down here that we've attached a simple hello world to, but you can also look at this task list controller for a little bit more in-depth example. So sample controller is now a registered controller that we can refer to. Pretty cool. Alright, so now I'm going to go to the main. I'm going to create a new page here called hello. And here I can refer to hello.html. Normally it picks it up right here, but it looks like I need to maybe synchronize this file. Boom, there it goes. Okay, just run a little synchronize, and there it is. Now you'll notice I get this completion that tells me where it's located, and there's my template. You'll notice I don't need to put a URL here, and I don't really need to even add this to the cache, because gruntTS will actually write it into a variable for us, and we can just go ahead and start using it. We also want to specify our controller. And now we can get started. So in the seed project, I don't actually have any prescribed way to host these files, but one thing you can do is if you have a Python simple HTTP server, will do just fine. So it starts it up on port 8000, and I can go to localhost 8000, and there we are. Except instead of home, I'm going to go to hello, and there it is, hello world. Of course we have all our Angular goodies, so we can go back here and add some other things like input text that's bound to the model. And by the time we get back here, you'll notice that Grunt has recompiled our hello partial, and we should be good to refresh this page and start editing. Alright, so that's the basics of it. I tried to lay it out in a way that kind of works well with TypeScript strengths, and builds it into a single script file in the order in which the files are referenced in this reference file. Alright, so that's pretty much all I had to say for this video. I'll have a follow-up on a little bit more of the details. If you have anything in particular that you're curious about or how it works, please post a comment to this video. Alright, thanks guys.